Hollywood's golden age had a secret currency. Before the red carpets, before the fame, before their names lit up marquees, they had to pay, not with talent, not with hard work, with their bodies. 20 of the most famous leading men in American cinema started the same way, in hotel rooms, at private parties, in locked offices where auditions happened without cameras. Some were teenagers, some were desperate. All of them learned the same lesson. If you want to be seen on screen, you first have to let them see everything. This is how they bought their way into Hollywood's spotlight. Subscribe to hear the stories they tried to bury and discover what really happened behind the carefully constructed facades.
James Dean, the boy they called Number 6. Jimmy arrived in Los Angeles with nothing but a haunting face and desperate hunger for recognition. The Chateau Marmont became his introduction to Hollywood's hidden economy, a place where young men weren't called by their names at private parties, but by numbers. Jimmy was Number 6. He had sad eyes and messy curls that made powerful men want to possess him. Rogers Brackett became his first sponsor, though sponsor was just polite language for what actually happened. Jimmy paid with his body for every opportunity Brackett provided. A neighbor heard him crying in the bathroom at 3 a.m. more than once, but by sunrise he'd be on set, pretending nothing had happened. The cocktail parties were worse. Jimmy would serve drinks, but everyone understood he was offering something beyond hospitality.
One television role cost him a night with an older investor. He agreed because he was exhausted from washing dishes near Sunset Boulevard, tired of being invisible. Someone filmed him once, secretly in a Wilshire Boulevard penthouse while he entertained a studio executive. That tape became leverage, insurance that Jimmy would never dare break away from the web of power wrapped around him. From that moment forward, his life belonged to unnamed handlers who controlled what he wore, where he went, who he dated. Jimmy traded his body for fame, but received only 3 films before dying in a mysterious car crash in 1955, right when his career was beginning. Marlon Brando, the man who slept for parts. Brando never pretended to be innocent. At a 1975 press party, he declared bluntly, "I slept with anyone who could give me a part, male or female. It didn't matter, as long as they had power." That confession, later quoted by Vanity Fair, served as rare confirmation of what everyone suspected about Hollywood's casting process. In the 1940s, Brando hustled on small New York stages until director George Cukor bought him for $300 weekly. The payment covered more than acting lessons. It included late-night private rehearsals in Cukor's Beverly Hills apartment. Cukor later recommended Brando to Elia Kazan, leading to his legendary casting in A Streetcar Named Desire. But Brando didn't limit himself to one benefactor. He methodically slept with directors, producers, even reporters, anyone who could move him closer to stardom.
A personal diary discovered after his death listed 14 men who had helped him with both their bodies and their money. One of them was Jack Warner, the mogul behind Warner Brothers, who rescued Brando from a sex scandal in 1953 so he could star in Julius Caesar. Brando understood the transaction clearly and never expressed shame about what he'd done to survive. His calculated approach to using his sexuality for advancement worked, but it established a template that countless other young actors would be forced to follow, often without Brando's clear-eyed understanding of the exchange.
Rock Hudson, the perfect companion. Rock wasn't just a Hollywood icon, he was the premium gift at parties fans never knew existed. As early as the 1950s, when he was just a hopeful at Universal, Rock appeared on Henry Wilson's list of high-potential pretty boys. Wilson was the most powerful manager in Hollywood, famous for training actors straight from the bedroom. Rock had a chiseled physique, a cinematic face, and a deep, seductive voice. But talent wasn't what got him chosen. A leaked studio memo from 1989 included an assistant's handwriting. "He's obedient, discreet, and always ready to accompany clients if I nod." They called Rock the perfect companion. He never asked who he was meeting, never said no.
From the Beverly Hills Hotel to Palm Springs Estates, Rock always arrived with a polite smile, poured drinks, made charming conversation, and when needed, walked into bedrooms without another word. A recorded phone call between Wilson and producer Ross Hunter, later published in Scotty Bowers' memoir, revealed, "He can handle 2 people a night, as long as no one takes pictures." When Rock became a sensation with Pillow Talk and Magnificent Obsession, he wasn't just the media's darling, but the most expensive asset in secret fundraising parties. Every time Rock appeared at these exclusive gatherings, studios secured millions from wealthy backers. After his death, a crumpled note was found with haunting words, "I was never allowed to say no." Cary Grant, The Gentleman's Secret Arrangements. Cary was hailed by the press as the husband every woman dreams of, but his reality existed on the opposite end of that fantasy. For nearly 2 decades early in his career, Grant lived with actor Randolph Scott in a relationship magazines curiously described as inseparable companions. At their Malibu Beach mansion, the pair hosted private parties for directors, screenwriters, and studio financiers, gatherings where, according to male escort matchmaker Scotty Bowers, Cary didn't just entertain, but orchestrated behind-the-scenes exchanges. A cinematographer recalled one occasion when Grant invited 3 directors to his home, then disappeared with them into a locked second-floor room. A week later, he landed the leading role in Bringing Up Baby. A leaked memo from Columbia Pictures in 1942 mentioned Grant's complete compliance with after-hours studio-arranged activities, including support for the studio's key financial partners. Even after becoming a household name, Grant couldn't or wouldn't step away. Confidential magazine once investigated a 1955 incident where Grant was spotted leaving the Biltmore Hotel at 2 a.m. alongside an anonymous European backer, just days before signing on for To Catch a Thief with Hitchcock. Perhaps that's why he married 5 times, but never truly settled with anyone. Even as tabloids swarmed, Grant never once responded, because he knew silence was the only thing that could keep him alive in a Hollywood full of traps. Clark Gable, before he was king. Before Clark became Rhett Butler, before anyone crowned him the King of Hollywood, he was a young escort serving older men in Oregon. In 1922, at just 21, Clark was kicked out of his home for dropping out of school and being jobless. With nowhere to go, he was taken in by William H. Wright, a prominent gay playwright, under the label of stage apprentice. In truth, Wright took care of Clark's every need, clothes, food, shelter, even pocket money, in exchange for the young man's total obedience. A former neighbor recalled in a 1978 memoir, "Every Friday night, Mr. Wright would have guests. Clark would serve drinks with a smile and knew exactly when to slip away into the private room." After Wright's sudden death from a stroke, Clark moved to Los Angeles, bringing along the contacts of his former benefactor. According to internal MGM records, Clark was once bailed out by a major director from a gay scandal involving a male critic so he could still audition for The Painted Desert. That film became his gateway into Hollywood. Louis B. Mayer, the MGM mogul, once sneered, "Gable knows the price of a tux and the price you pay to wear it on the red carpet." Even at the height of fame, Clark maintained a murky relationship with George Cukor, the openly gay director. Rumors suggested Clark influenced Cukor's removal from Gone with the Wind, fearing the director might reveal secrets from their shared past. Gene Kelly, Dancing Through Darkness. Before stardom, Gene was a dance instructor in Pittsburgh. In 1937, he moved to New York with 2 suitcases and a notebook filled with producers' names passed down from former students. One of the first he met was Charles Weidman, a well-known choreographer who brought him into a private training group that lasted 6 months, a covert sexual audition pipeline for Broadway producers. Another trainee later revealed, "We didn't rehearse. We were judged by our bodies, our obedience, and our flexibility, both on stage and off." Gene passed the screening and was recommended to director Stanley Donen, who became both his longtime collaborator and, according to whispers, his secret lover for nearly a decade. Even after achieving fame, Gene couldn't escape the grip. Studios pressured him into exclusive social engagements with investors. A former Variety journalist recalled Gene once dancing the entire night at a Bel Air mansion, But there were no cameras, no stage, just 3 powerful men and a contract waiting to be signed. In a letter to a close friend in 1959, Jean wrote, "They want me to dance for them, but no one ever asks if I'm tired, if I'm sad, or if I'm disgusted with myself." Maybe that's why behind the stage lights, Gene Kelly always preferred rooms without mirrors, hallways without footsteps, and silent walks into the night where nobody could see what the dancing had cost him. The perfect face's price. Tony was the embodiment of the Hollywood dream. Strikingly handsome, sharply dressed, with a smile that silenced every casting room. But behind that polished surface, Tony once whispered to a co-star, "To get roles, I've done things that weren't in the script." In 1948, a young man from the Bronx stepped into Universal's audition room. Within 5 minutes, an elderly producer looked him up and down and said, "I think you could be a star. But first, tell me, are you obedient?" That wasn't small talk. According to journalist Robert Hoffler, author of The Man Who Invented Rock Hudson, Tony once spent an entire week living in a casting director's private apartment in exchange for a role in Crisscross 1949, the part that first caught the industry's attention. Tony never denied those nights.
In a 1990 interview that was later cut from broadcast, he admitted, "I knew exactly how to use my face. It was the most valuable thing I had when I was young." By the time he starred in Some Like It Hot, the press hailed him as the heartthrob of the century. But in his private journal, Tony once scribbled, "If people knew what I did to get this role, they'd never think I was sweet again." His beauty became both his greatest asset and his heaviest burden, the currency that bought him fame but cost him something he could never quite name or reclaim.
Anthony Perkins, Norman Bates's real horror. Anthony was once Hollywood's darling, with dreamy eyes, a tall, slender frame, and a shy, delicate voice that made every director want to reshape him. Before becoming Norman Bates in Psycho, Anthony wandered through New York, surviving through prearranged weddings at the Commodore Hotel. One of his regular clients was Roy Cohn, the era's most powerful attorney, who connected Anthony with media moguls looking for cultured, obedient boys to entertain their guests. An anonymous industry insider told Confidential magazine, "Perkins was rare. He made people feel like they were the only one. In return, they gave him roles." Alfred Hitchcock himself allegedly bought out Anthony from another studio with a contract rumored to include a secret clause requiring Anthony to remain intimately available throughout Psycho's production. In unpublished letters to an ex-boyfriend revealed in 2007, Anthony wrote, "I'm not afraid to die for a role. I'm afraid people will find out how I had to die slowly to earn it." After Psycho, Anthony was typecast not just on screen, but in life. In 1972, he told a psychologist, "I'm no longer me. I'm a deal, a gift that was traded." His performances captured isolation and terror so perfectly because he understood what it meant to be watched, controlled, and owned, not by a fictional mother, but by an industry that had purchased him piece by piece until nothing authentic remained. Dennis Hopper, the rebel who sold his soul. Dennis embodied New Hollywood's wild spirit, a rebel draped in dust and defiance. But even he confessed, "I sold my soul for a supporting role and one night in Beverly Hills." In the mid-60s, Dennis hit rock bottom, blacklisted from major projects due to his reputation for violence, insubordination, and drug use. One night, he received an invitation to a private casting party in a Mulholland Drive mansion where men like him could trade their bodies for a chance to return to the screen. According to director Nicholas Ray's memoir, Dennis gladly serviced an older financier all night in exchange for a small role in The Sons of Katie Elder, 1965, the role that put him back on Hollywood's radar.
Dennis's ex-girlfriend, actress Brooke Hayward, once said, "Dennis would endure anything, even humiliation, if it meant stepping in front of the camera again." In a 1983 Rolling Stone interview, Dennis admitted, "I used to be a bastard, but before that, I was a good boy, serving rich men just to do what I loved." His later success with Easy Rider seemed like redemption, but Dennis never forgot those nights in Beverly Hills, the drugs, the violence, the chaos that marked his life.
Some friends believed it all traced back to the humiliation of those early years, when he learned that talent alone would never be enough in Hollywood's economy of flesh.
Rudolph Valentino, the first Latin lover's hidden price. Rudolph was Hollywood's first elegant heartthrob, adored nationwide as the Latin lover. But long before women chased him, Rudolph had to serve men just to survive. According to Emily Leiter's 2003 biography, Rudolph worked as a waiter in New York before being fired for getting too friendly with male clients. He was then introduced to a secret male review club where wealthy men could rent a beautiful boy for the night, $50 per visit. An old acquaintance told the Brooklyn Eagle. He didn't want to do it, but when someone threatened to call the police over his illegal residency, Valentino said yes, and every week someone came to take him home. It was one of those clients, producer Norman Cary, who eventually brought Rudolph to California and helped land him a role in The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, 1921, the film that made him a star. But at what cost? In a handwritten note discovered after his death, Rudolph once wrote, "The world calls me their lover, but the first night I lay still, no one kissed me at all." His sudden death at 31 from peritonitis sparked mass hysteria, with women rioting at his funeral. They mourned the fantasy they'd loved, never knowing the reality of how he'd paid for the privilege of becoming their dream. Tyrone Power, beauty as currency. Tyrone was the face of American cinema in the 1940s. Women adored him, men envied him. But what no one knew was that Tyrone learned early on that beauty in Hollywood isn't a gift, it's currency. In 1936, before signing with 20th Century Fox, Tyrone was invited to vacation in Palm Springs with an older producer later named in FBI files for hosting casting parties disguised as private retreats. A staff member told journalist William Mann, Tyrone was asked to try on swimwear. Then he was asked to try obedience. The very next morning, he got a 5-year contract. The story didn't stop there. For years, Tyrone's calendar was filled by Hollywood elites who sponsored him when he wasn't on set. His appearances at Brown Derby nightclubs always came with whispers that he was paying debts with charm.
His close friend, actor Cesar Romero, once said, Tyrone knew that to stay where he was, he had to protect the image, even if the cost was never being allowed to tell the truth. Tyrone's marriages to actresses were widely publicized, but colleagues noticed he seemed most comfortable during all-male gatherings at private estates. The perfect profile, the chiseled jaw, the romantic leading man persona, all of it was constructed and maintained through arrangements that began long before he became a household name and continued long after.
Montgomery Clift, the sorrowful eyes. Montgomery never smiled for long in front of the camera. His gaze always carried a quiet sadness, as if it didn't belong to this world. And that made sense, because this world, Hollywood, was a place where he once sold himself just to land a supporting role. According to diary entries left by Elizabeth Taylor, Montgomery once confided, "A friend introduced me to a stage director to trade intimacy for a part. When Taylor asked if he regretted it, Montgomery simply said, 'No. But every time I remember it, I feel like a part of me died.'" In 1945, before anyone knew his name, Montgomery agreed to a private audition at a Bel Air mansion where acclaimed director Joshua Logan was looking for a fresh face. After the session, Montgomery stayed there for 3 days.
An elderly housemaid recalled, he cried a lot, but when he left, he had a contract in his hand. Even later, when fame came, Montgomery dodged every question about how it all began. Once, when asked by Variety, he answered, "I started in theater and in a few rooms where no one was watching." He lived in loneliness, battled alcohol, and died with a crooked smile. No one knows what secrets he took to the grave, but his performances captured a unique kind of devastation, the look of someone who traded pieces of himself and could never quite assemble them back together again.
Tab Hunter, the teen idol's double life. In the 1950s, no one outshone the golden glow of Tab, the bright smile, the chiseled frame, the all-American boy. But behind the idol facade was a truth Tab had to bury for half a lifetime.
In 1950, at just 19, Tab was arrested at a gay party in Long Beach, a scandal that nearly destroyed his career before it started. But a powerful, unnamed producer bailed him out, not with money, but with an exclusive 5-year contract. When asked about the scandal later, Tab would only smile faintly and say, "I didn't lose anything. I just had to stay the night with someone I couldn't say no to." Throughout his golden years, Tab was forced into fake romance contracts with young actresses, Natalie Wood, Debbie Reynolds, all to cover up his real relationships. Later in his memoir, Tab wrote, "I wasn't chosen for my acting. I was chosen because I was willing to be quiet and beautiful in the way Hollywood needed." The studio manufactured his entire public persona, pairing him with starlets for photo opportunities while controlling every aspect of his private life. The constant performance, pretending to be someone he wasn't, hiding who he loved, smiling through the lie, eventually wore him down. Tab's later decision to come out publicly, decades after his career had faded, represented a kind of freedom he'd never known during his peak years, when the closet was the price of fame.
Richard Chamberlain, Dr. Kildare's Hidden Truth. As Dr. Kildare in NBC's 1961 hit series, Richard was the dreamboat of millions. But behind the scenes, he lived in fear. Fear of exposure. Fear of losing it all if just one intimate photo leaked. A former assistant told Hollywood Insider, he never left the studio with his lover. All meetings happened at his private apartment. The windows always shut, the curtains always drawn, the phone always unplugged. Richard was pressured into after-hours auditions held past midnight in Beverly Hills, where directors, producers, even journalists evaluated candidates not on performance, but on physical compliance. Once, he was asked to privately engage with a network executive before a new role was greenlit.
When a male co-star once suggested going public, Richard coldly replied, "If I lose this role because I love you, will you be able to feed me?" He wore the mask of the perfect gentleman for 40 years. Only after retiring did he dare admit the truth, publishing a memoir that revealed the exhausting double life he'd maintained. Richard's story illustrated how television's family-friendly image required even stricter control than film. The weekly exposure to millions of viewers meant any scandal could instantly destroy not just a career, but an entire show's profitability. The pressure to remain closeted wasn't just about personal shame. It was about protecting a multi-million-dollar franchise built on wholesome fantasy that couldn't survive authentic revelation.
Troy Donahue, the heartthrob's midnight auditions. With his golden hair and surfer charm, Troy was the national heartthrob of the 1960s. But when the lights went out, he didn't go home. He showed up at invitation-only parties where casting didn't happen in front of a camera, but behind closed doors. At one such gathering in 1958 at a Mulholland Drive estate, Troy was summoned into a room where director Jack Warner and 2 wealthy backers waited. A server present recalled, "He came out 30 minutes later, face pale as a sheet. He hadn't been asked to act, just to let them see what he looked like without clothes." After that night, he was offered a 7-year contract with Warner Brothers. From then on, every appearance Troy made came with a price. In a leaked journal, he wrote, "Every time I appeared on screen, I had to erase a part of myself."
After a few years, there was nothing left but the image they created. Troy spiraled into addiction, lost everything, and died in solitude in 2001. But at least he had his moment of fame, brief and bright before burning out completely. His career trajectory followed a familiar pattern, rapid ascent built on physical appeal and sexual availability, followed by equally rapid decline once his youth faded and newer, younger men arrived to take his place in the same rooms with the same powerful men making the same terrible bargains.
Van Johnson, the boy next door's dark beginning. Van was MGM's signature nice guy next door throughout the 1940s. But in real life, Van once slept on warehouse floors and borrowed money for food. When director George Cukor happened to spot him at a cheap diner on Melrose, he said something that brought Van to tears. "I don't need you to act. I just need you to behave." That night, Van was invited to Cukor's estate. They auditioned in the bedroom. The next morning, Van walked away with a real screen test and a stack of rent money, enough for 3 months. Later, during a drinking session, Van confided to a friend, "I'm not proud of it, but I didn't want to go back to sleeping on park benches. Here, people don't ask who you are. They just ask, will you comply?" The boy next door became a star, but the wholesome image was entirely manufactured.
Everything about Van's public persona, his friendly smile, his approachable manner, his safe sexuality, was designed to hide the truth of how he'd entered the industry. Van's career lasted decades, but he rarely spoke about his early years. The shame never fully disappeared, even as success accumulated. He understood that his entire career was built on a foundation he could never acknowledge, and that silence became its own kind of prison, trapping him between the truth he lived and the lie the public believed.
George Maharis, undone by one headline. George was the golden face of early 60s television, famous for his role as Buzz Murdoch in Route 66. Handsome, rugged, masculine, George captivated women and made men jealous. But one November night in 1967, it all came crashing down with a single headline in the Los Angeles Times. TV actor arrested in public restroom for indecent conduct. The story was buried, but court records revealed George had been caught in an intimate exchange with an undercover LAPD officer in the restroom of the Westwood Hotel. The scandal didn't just raise questions about his sexuality, it made the studios abandon him overnight. A former director who worked with George once said, "Everyone knew from the start he wasn't cast for his acting. He was beautiful and he was obedient." After the scandal, George vanished from the screen.
He lived reclusively, avoided interviews, and never spoke of that night again. His story illustrated the precarious nature of closeted fame. While some men managed to maintain their secrets for decades, others, like George, saw their carefully constructed facades demolished in a single moment. The arrest wasn't just about morality charges. It was about exposing the transactional nature of his career, revealing that his success had never been about talent, but about what he was willing to do in private to secure roles in public.
The clean-cut face's dirty secret. John was known as the cleanest face in Hollywood by the end of the 1950s. With perfect looks, military polish, and charm to spare, he was the go-to actor for heroes, officers, and aristocrats. But what audiences didn't see was the list of strangers John met outside studio hours. A former Universal Studios limo driver revealed in a quietly released 1984 memoir, Gavin was often driven to his Santa Monica apartment at midnight, where men in tuxedos waited. No names, no questions. An hour later, he came out blank-faced and simply said, "Take me home. I need a shower." In return for these meetings, John secured roles before scripts were even finished. No auditions, no questions. A Universal executive once admitted, he was the perfect mask for the filth we were hiding behind the scenes.
John's career illustrated how Hollywood's system functions smoothly when everyone played their assigned roles. The clean-cut leading man attended midnight meetings, performed required services, and returned to set the next morning to play heroes and gentlemen. The irony was never acknowledged that the most wholesome-looking men often had the darkest secrets, precisely because their appearance made them valuable for covering up the industry's systemic exploitation. John survived the system relatively intact, his secrets never becoming public scandals. But survival came at the cost of living with what he knew about himself and what he'd done to maintain his place in Hollywood's hierarchy.
20 men, 20 stories, one system that consumed them all. What you've just heard wasn't an aberration, it was a procedure. Hollywood built its golden age on the bodies of young men who were told that talent alone would never be enough. They needed to prove their compliance, demonstrate their obedience, show they understood the real price of fame. Some survived with careers intact. Others, like me, tried to speak up and paid with their lives. But all of us carried the same burden, knowing that every role, every contract, every moment of success was purchased with pieces of ourselves we could never reclaim. The question isn't whether this happened. The evidence is overwhelming. The the patterns undeniable. The question is whether it ever stopped, or whether it simply became more sophisticated, more secretive, more deniable. The power structures remain.
The desperation of young performers continues. The willingness of those in power to exploit that desperation hasn't disappeared. It's just learned to hide better. These 20 men deserved better than the choice they were forced to make. Dignity or dreams, authenticity or survival. They chose survival, and Hollywood made billions from their compliance while erasing the truth of what that compliance cost. If these hidden stories moved you, share this video and subscribe. The truth they tried to bury deserves to be remembered.